Hey, friends. Welcome to Dishing on Divorce, the first Dishing on Divorce of 2026 on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcast, and TV. I'm your host, Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. As a recovering lawyer, a current educator, a spiritual counselor, and a divorce coach who's committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved, look at me as your guide on the side, emotionally, strategically, and with an eye toward your future. I walk people through the tornado of divorce so they feel grounded and in alignment with their vision and values. Every week, I invite guests to speak who I connect with and who have empowering lessons to share. This week, I'm excited to speak with Oona Metz, the author of Unhitched, the Essential Divorce Guide for Women. So a little about Oona. Oona is a therapist with 30 years of clinical experience. For the past 15 years, she's specialized in treating women navigating divorce. She leads 3 weekly divorce support groups and trains mental health professionals to lead them as well. As mentioned above, her book, Unhitched, the Essential Divorce Guide for Women, comes out on January 13th. Welcome, Oona.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. I'm really delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Me too. Me too. So I start all of my podcasts with the same question. Oona, tell us your story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I have been a therapist for about 30 years. And about 16 years ago, I went through my own divorce. And I really wished that I had a place to go. I wished I had a divorce support group to attend. And I looked and I couldn't find one. And at that time, I was already running support groups, not divorce support groups, but I was running support groups. And so I thought, maybe when I heal from my divorce, I'll start one up. So I did start one up a little while later. And it filled so quickly that I started 2 more. And all of those 3 groups, weekly groups, have been going now for the past 15 years, meeting weekly. So I've literally spent time with hundreds of women who are going through the emotional journey of divorce. And with all of that knowledge kind of jangling around in my head, I finally decided, there's so much useful information here. I just need to write it all down and give it to a wider audience. And so that's how I decided to write the book. And here we are today. Yes.
That's amazing because, every story, every person's story is unique and specific to them. And every story shares different aspects of connection. The fear of the unknown, the worry about money, the concern about where am I going to live? How are the kids going to be? That all weighs into everyone's divorce who has any kind of issues that are real and meaningful. And I feel like that's where we layer people and people find connection. And so
absolutely,
groups are so important. But I sometimes wonder, and maybe you could share, do groups sometimes turn into like a complaining match, or are people really learning skills, or both, or do both happen at the same time?
Well, I would say that complaining is kind of saying the same thing over and over again without any hope of a solution. And without any taking responsibility. So in my groups, one of the things I do that I think is really important to keep us all on track is that I always meet with people for 2 times individually before they join the group. And in one of those meetings, we really talk about what their goals are. And if their goal is, I just want to come and complain about my situation, I might say, this is not the right group for you. Like, it needs to be something that you want to change about yourself, something you want to change about the way you feel about yourself, or something you want to change about the way you interact with other people. so that we make up 3 goals for them. I keep a copy, they keep a copy, and we really use that as a guide as they're going through the group, kind of for their intentions. It's like either their goals or their intentions, and that really helps with cutting down on just being there to complain. But people
Yeah.
certainly need to talk about how hard it is, and that's different. To me, that's different than complaining if you're
Yeah.
talking about how hard it can be, because it can be hard. The process, it's always hard.
It's
I mean,
always
not
hard.
can be. It
Yeah.
always is hard. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
always hard, even if you were the one who made the decision. And sometimes
Absolutely.
it's even harder because
Mhm.
you feel so responsible for everyone in your life
Right.
whose worlds touches your relationship. And
That's right.
and so it's challenging no matter what. So
Mhm.
tell us all a little bit about the book. Like what's in there? What are
Okay.
the gems of
Mhm.
wisdom that you really are so proud of and you think are making a
Mhm.
difference?
Yeah. So I really wanted to take the book and think about what it is that my clients ask me, right?
Mhm.
And what are the questions? And so I really structured the book from the very beginning of divorce, like when you're making the decision, how you make the decision, or if the decision gets made for you. And then I really take people like almost chronologically through every stage. So you've made the decision or the decision's been made, and now you need to tell people, right? And who do you tell, and how much do you tell, and how do you tell your kids, right? And how do you support your kids? I have a couple of chapters in there about the best ways to
Mm,
support your kids. Um, and how do you deal with all of the emotions that are going to come up? Because I think there's so many emotions in divorce, and I think people often feel kind of all alone with them, or they feel like their emotions are too much. And so we really talk a lot about emotions and how to manage your emotions. Um, we also talk about boundaries and renegotiating boundaries in the book. And then it really ends with thinking about dating after divorce and thinking about how you have a new identity and what you want your identity to be. Because I think a lot of times people's identity really shifts when they go from being a married person to a divorced person. And so there are lots of pieces of your identity that can shift as
right.
well. And how do you become the real you that you want to become?
Yeah. I mean,
So,
that's so wonderful. The journey you provide is very step by step. Um,
yeah,
so that means you don't have to read the whole book all at once. It means
no,
that, read what you need and
right.
then put it down.
Yep.
One of the questions that you gave to me to ask was like,
Mhm.
people in stressful situations have a really hard time concentrating. And
Yes.
women navigating divorce especially have trouble focusing. And
Mhm.
sitting down to read a dense text can be just another job, just another task on their
Mhm.
list. So, given that, what were some special considerations you took when you wrote the book um, to acknowledge that it's hard and
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be so detailed, or maybe
Right.
you
Right.
know
Right. Doesn't have to be dense. Well, so many women that I've worked with have said to me, I don't know what's happened to me. I used to love to read, and now I feel like I can't read. And so I would always reassure them, like, we know that when stress goes up, cognition goes down.
Yeah,
This is a totally normal thing. You've got so many things on your mind, and your ability to read will come back to you. So that was a big consideration when I was writing the book. It's like, how am I going to write a book for people who find it hard to read? And so what I did is it's really, I have very small chunks of text. So there's there's a nice chunk of text that you can read with bullet points. And then it goes into a vignette. So I kind of give an example of a concept, and then you read a little story about somebody who's going through that same exact concept. And then there might be an exercise, so that you just have a chance to reflect. You don't have to do all the exercises or any of them, but I think people really like the exercises because it gives them a chance to slow down and think, what worked in my marriage and what didn't work in my marriage, and who do I want to be now, and how do I learn from my feelings? How can I get curious about what I'm feeling and learn from those things? So that's how the book is kind of structured, that there's just, a lot of information, but a lot of stories as well. And then the exercises to help you think about your own situation.
No, so I love that because what you're describing is education, tools,
Yep.
and then application, a story of someone
Yeah.
who needed those tools and how they used them, and
Yep.
then an exercise to help people find the tools and the habit to begin
Yes.
something different. Something
Yes.
I talk about all the time is new habits and neuroplasticity and
Yes.
breaking old patterns. And
Yeah.
one of the things that James Clear writes in his book Atomic Habits is that you can't break a habit. You can simply replace one habit for another habit.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
and
You
so
create new habits.
you
Yeah.
create new habits, and then you're creating new brain technology, right? You're creating pathways, and you have to just keep building on those new pathways
Yes.
because the old habits are not bad. They're just the old habits, and they're
Right.
it's like the highway. It's much easier to take the highway than cut a new path through the woods.
That's
So
exactly right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what we're doing with your exercises, I'm imagining, is
Mhm.
creating new pathways through the woods. But we have to do
Mhm.
it a little bit at a time because
Yep.
it's like a New Year's resolution, right? You
Right.
can't
Right.
say, I'm going to
Right.
lose 30 pounds and expect that tomorrow you will have
Right.
lost 30 pounds. It
Right.
takes some time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I really appreciate how you structured the book, and I think that's a great
Mhm.
tool for women navigating divorce.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I was also really conscious of adding all of the vignettes because I think that women oftentimes feel very isolated when they're going
mhm.
through divorce. They often feel like they're the only ones. They come to me and they say, how is it possible that I'm the only person I know going through a divorce when the divorce rate is still so high?
Yeah,
And so I think giving them the vignettes helps them, even though they're not people who are actually in their lives, but reading about another person's experience can really help them to feel not so alone.
so what would you say, like, if you had to pull one of those vignettes from the book,
Mhm.
that, like, what's a vignette you can share with us here that, is from the beginning of the process, how people sort of wrap their
Mm.
heads around, I have to actually do this thing that's so scary.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, one of the vignettes really talks about the ways in which sometimes the differences in parenting can really erode at any kind of goodwill in a marriage. And I see this a lot where people have really extreme differences in parenting, and one parent might also be very critical of the other ones or really shame them. And there's one story in there of a woman who really was staying in her marriage for her children, but her children began to learn to criticize her from their father. And when that started to happen, because he was a very critical man, and when that started to happen, she realized, I actually need to leave my marriage for my children, not stay in my marriage for
Mhm.
my children. So that's a really poignant one of the vignettes, and I think really resonates with a lot of people who finally get to a point where they don't want to leave their children. They don't want to break up the family in any way. And yet they get to the point where they say, this isn't good role modeling for
Yeah.
my children. I don't want my children to think that this is what love looks like, or that this is how you treat someone that you love, right? I don't want
Yeah.
them to have that lesson. And I certainly wouldn't want them to be in this kind of marriage. So why am I going to stay in this kind of marriage?
Right. Right. I mean, that's it. It often takes a long time to get there. Um,
Yes, years,
because
years.
I think everyone who gets married
Mhm.
wants it to be forever.
Of
And so
course.
and through richer and poorer, sickness and health,
Mhm.
good and bad. And
That's
so,
right.
and we know that relationships take work. So
Mhm.
when to tell the difference, or how to tell the difference
Mhm.
between a relationship that needs work and
Mhm.
a relationship that needs separation,
Right.
that's something that is so hard for
So
people
hard.
to decide. And
Yes.
it takes a really long time.
Yep. Yep.
And
It really does. And I think one of the things I would say about that is that one of the most important things is if the couple can agree that there is a problem. And if one member of the couple says, "I don't know what you're talking about. There is no problem." And the other person says, "Hey, my leg just got cut off, like I'm bleeding out. There's a big problem in our marriage,"
yeah,
and the other person says, "I don't see any problem," or "The problem's all you." That is not a great indication that things are going to change. And of course, you don't leave if that's the first conversation you have. But over time, if there's no agreement on even what the problem is, um, then it's tricky.
yeah.
It's
No, it's
tricky.
very tricky. It's very tricky. And on that note, we are going to take a quick 30-second break to have a word from our sponsor. We will be back with our guest, Oona Metz. And we're back with author and therapist Oona Metz. Oona has written a book that's coming out next week, Unhitched, a book that, oh, I love it. Essential guide
Here
for
it is.
the
Yeah.
essential divorce guide for women. I love it. Um, what did you see in the divorce world out there that you felt was not answering all the questions that led you
Mm,
to feel like this is new information that people really need?
mhm. So, with my divorce support groups, I had been recommending to them when they asked for books, I had been recommending a book that was written in 1992.
Mm,
And that book became more and more and more outdated as time went on. 15 years ago, it wasn't that out of date, but now it's pretty out of date. And I was looking around, and there are some books out there that are good books about some specific pieces of divorce, like the financial aspect or the legal aspect, and about some specific things like narcissism or infidelity. But I couldn't find this particular book that I decided to write, which was really just a guide just for women about the emotional journey of divorce from
yeah.
beginning to end. And so that is really why I decided to write it. And since then, I started in 2022. Since then, there's been pretty much an explosion of information about divorce out there, online, on social media. There are more books out there now, which is great because I think more information is good. But sometimes it can also be overwhelming to have so much information and try to collect it all. And so the nice thing about this book is that it's all kind of right here, right in one place.
Yeah, you have
So
one volume and it takes you
yeah,
through the whole journey.
yeah.
And, that's a lot like what I do in coaching. I
Mhm,
work with people at the beginning, the middle, and the end. But at the
mhm.
beginning, we start by creating a vision. And like,
Yeah,
what would you imagine your life could look like? Because I
yeah.
find so often we rush, we rush,
Mm,
not rush into the decision, but we feel like we have to rush to get information, or we have
mhm,
to rush to pick a lawyer, or we have to rush to do X, Y, and Z. And
mhm.
the fact of the matter is, we don't have to rush.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
we can pause and
Mhm,
we can plan and we
mhm.
can strategize and we can
Mhm.
ask ourselves the hard questions.
Mhm.
So how do you do that in group? How do you sort of ask the questions that people have
Mhm.
to ask themselves?
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think as we go along, we are all I'm asking them the questions and they're asking each other the questions as well. Um, One of the things I really like about my groups is that people are at different stages of the
Mm,
divorce process. And so somebody who's in the beginning is looking at somebody who's further along, and that person is like the beacon of hope person, right? They're thinking like, "Oh my god, that person got through, and so I can get through too." And for the people who are further along, it's so helpful when a new woman arrives in the group because they can look at them and think to themselves, "Wow, I remember when I was in that place, and my goodness, I have come such a long way." And they can also be very helpful. And I think, it's that's such a helpful thing for people when they're in distress, is to be able to be helpful to somebody else too, right?
yeah,
And to be able to be wise and give some good advice or
right.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, being
yeah,
of service and giving of yourself is
yeah.
something that really feeds your soul. And
Right, right.
so often when you're going through divorce, you feel like your soul is being crushed. You
Yeah.
feel like your whole sense of self, your whole identity, who you thought you were, is no
Mhm.
longer that person.
Right.
And the what I share with my clients, and I'm sure it's
Mhm.
evident in your book, is that like who you are is still there, but it's been covered over by
Yes,
layers of messaging, by
yes.
layers of experiences. And so let's lift off some of those layers so that
Mhm.
soul inside of you can breathe a little. And
Exactly.
you remember who you were and
Yeah.
who you can be.
Yes.
That's what I hope women
Mhm.
will find, the freedom to say, "I can let go of this thing
Mhm.
that's been suffocating me."
Right,
And
right.
that's why a lot of people ultimately do choose divorce, even though they might feel like they're still suffocating
Mm,
during the
mm.
process,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
the process moves forward even if it moves slowly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say, if people say, "I'm not sure who I am anymore," I'll say, "I want you to remember about when you were a child,
Mhm.
and what it was that you loved to do when you were a child." Because children are oftentimes kind of unencumbered by other people's expectations and having to caretake and all of that. And so sometimes that can be an important clue about who you want to become and what your next identity is going to be. Maybe you loved to draw when you were a kid, and maybe now you want to get back to that and take an art class or something. But
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a big piece of it. But it's
mhm.
also the forgetting who you were, forgetting the things that
Yeah,
you did before,
right.
because, it's the difference between role and soul. And
Mhm.
when you're in a marriage and you're raising kids, you have a role that you feel you need to fulfill, that
Mhm.
society often tells you, that your
Yes.
spouse is telling you this is what a wife looks like, or this is what
Right.
a mother is supposed to look like.
Yep.
And sometimes they're saying, why don't you look like that? So you're keeping on
Mhm.
trying to aspire to what that image is.
That's right.
And divorce allows us to release some of those pressures, even though we don't realize that that release
Mhm.
can be a positive thing for us.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it's really,
Absolutely. Women are so socialized in our society to be such caretakers, and I think we're really good at it, but really so often at the expense of taking care of ourselves,
yeah,
right? Or knowing what we want or what we need. And so
yeah.
I think divorce does offer this incredible opportunity to come back to that.
hmm Yeah,
Mhm.
I think so too. One of the things that came up today in a conversation I was having earlier um, was the question, what do you do to reset at the end of a workday?
Mhm. Mm.
And what I realized is what I really love to do is I like to cook a meal. I
Uh-huh.
like to make myself dinner. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes at the end of the day, you feel like, oh, I just need to order in or I'll just have a
Mhm.
bowl of cereal. But
Right.
when I look back and I sort of try to ask myself, why is that so, comforting
Mhm.
for me? But I loved preparing meals for my family. And
Mm-hmm.
now my kids are grown and flown, and it's
Yep.
just me,
Yep.
but still
Uh-huh.
really wonderful to divide the day from work
Mm-hmm.
into the rest of my life by
Mm-hmm.
preparing a meal.
Right.
And
Which is so nurturing, and it can be creative, and oh, that's
yeah,
so good that you found that. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's the kind of thing I encourage people to look for, those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, so what are there things that you sort of encourage the women in your group to explore?
Hmm. Well, I wanted to tell you one of the things that I've been doing recently
Mhm.
related to that, which is that, you know, that kind of music that they play when you get a massage or if you go to a spa. It's like it doesn't have any words. It's very calming and soothing. Well, it turns out Alexa will play that for you. If you say, Alexa, play spa music, she will play spa music for you. And so at nighttime, I have been listening to spa music to just wind down after a long day. And it's been so relaxing. It's been great. I'm so glad I found it.
It's wonderful, but that's about you're also rewiring your
Yes.
brain into what can I do for
Yep.
myself?
Yep.
What new habits can I engage in that
Exactly.
will feed my heart, feed my
Yeah.
soul?
It's rewiring the brain and the nervous system too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is so powerful and so important in
Yeah.
divorce because
Yeah.
we're on edge and we may be coming out of relationships where we've been walking on eggshells.
Yes.
And for many of my clients, that's where they are when they come to me.
Hmm. Exactly.
So,
Same.
I'm sure in your world it's the same thing. And
Absolutely.
you know, so you had mentioned that there are a lot of books out there these days on the topic
Hmm.
of narcissism. Now,
Hmm.
how does that come into your groups? Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that everyone feels like their spouse
Hmm.
was. And
Right.
I will share that not everyone is.
Right.
In this world of divorce, people leave relationships with spouses that exhibit those traits
Yes.
pretty frequently. It's
Pretty
not
frequently.
it's not like people are just crying wolf. There are
Right.
people that really have these traits. So tell me how that works in group and in your book. What do you teach us?
Yeah. I have a much longer vignette about somebody who is in a narcissistic relationship in the book. And then I go and explain exactly what narcissism is and what love bombing is um, and all the traits of the official diagnosis and so on and so forth. And we do talk a lot about it in the group. And, you know, I certainly can't diagnose somebody who I've never seen before, right? So I'm not about to diagnose somebody's spouse, but I can say, boy, those really sound like narcissistic traits. Um, and one of the things that I do that's really helpful with women, whether they're married to or divorcing a narcissist or not, is I remind them about how well they know their spouse, and I
Mhm.
ask them to recall their powers of prediction. So they might say to me, well, I know my spouse has had all these, has done this and that and X and Y and Z, but I'm gonna call and ask for an apology about such and such. And I'll say to them, I want you to use your powers of prediction. What do you think is going to happen if you call? Or they might not say I'm going to ask for apology, but I'm going to call and say how angry I am about something, or I'm going to say how wronged I feel. And I'll say, I want you to use your powers of prediction. What are the chances that your ex is going to say, oh, gee, you're right, and I am so sorry, and I'm never going to do that again? And if the chances are zero, then you really need to evaluate, like, what's your goal here? And it might be that your goal is you need to vent and you just need to say it out loud with no expectations. But if your expectation is that there's going to be a change or somebody's going to apologize or something like that, let's think about another thing you can do.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's
because
what,
people with narcissistic traits do not apologize. They do not take responsibility. They're
no.
always going to shift the blame. And so trying to beat your head against the wall, trying to get somebody to take responsibility if they are exhibiting narcissistic traits is just going to lead you to further frustration,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
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 No, you've been walking on eggshells and your expectations have been dashed time and time again.
Mhm.
So now when you're going through this really dysregulating
Mhm.
moment, why
Mhm.
would they behave any differently?
Right.
Rather than
No.
they're going to dig into their narcissistic
Yes.
traits. And that was hard for me,
Mhm.
when things got worse before they got
Mhm.
better.
Yeah.
Because what was interesting in my scenario, in my life,
Mhm.
I called it, but he agreed.
Uh-huh.
And so in the beginning, it was peaceful
Uh-huh.
until we had to
Uh-huh.
talk about money.
Money. Yeah.
And then it got really mean. So,
Yeah.
and took a really long time. And
Mhm.
so we have expectations, but we're the only ones who can control ourselves. And
That's
so
right.
how do we navigate those expectations, well, we know that they can be better.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
maybe they can't,
Right.
right? What if
Right.
maybe they can't?
Yep.
And assessing what they're trying to achieve and finding alignment with what you're trying to achieve can
Mhm.
be a more effective way to get
Right.
what you need.
There's so much letting go in divorce. You're letting go of your marriage. You might be letting go of your house. You might be letting go of a lot of finances. You might be letting go of seeing your kids every day. Um, but there's other things to let go of too. And one of them is really the hope that things are going to get better or that your spouse is going to be a different person. You have to let go of your spouse's version of the narrative of what happened in your marriage and divorce.
Yeah,
So many women say to me, like, oh, but why won't he understand that the reason we got divorced was because of his drinking or, whatever, substitute anything in there because of XYZ.
right.
And he doesn't have that narrative and he's not going to, and maybe his family members don't either. And there's a way in which you have to, in order to move on, you're going to have to let go of trying to control that narrative, right?
Sometimes I invite my clients to write the letter they wish their spouse could write to
Yes.
them. And
Yes.
then,
Oh, great.
right, then they have it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so they can look at it and they can also see how unrealistic it is to expect that those words would come out of that mouth.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I
But they
have
do
no,
have the letter. I love that. I
yeah,
love that. I might have
yeah,
to borrow that. Ugh.
yeah. Go right ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
It's
is
a
this
great
is
exercise.
about empowering people with new exercises, new
Absolutely.
tools.
Yeah.
So we're almost at the end of time.
Oh,
What would you
wow.
like to, I know this
It
goes fast.
flew.
What
Yeah.
would you like to leave our audience with as we move through and go
Mhm.
out and buy your book next week?
Yeah. I think I would like to say that divorce is always heartbreaking and hard and stressful. Please, please, please don't do it alone.
Mm.
Have a coach like Lisa, hire a therapist. I'm not trying to sell my services here. I'm full. But, another therapist, I'm happy to recommend one. Um, Find your people, find a support group where people really understand what you're going through, because I think people can have really loving, well-meaning friends and family, and if they're not going through a divorce, sometimes they just don't get it in the same way. So
Yeah.
please don't do this alone.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Mhm,
One of the things I often share is that all those people in your world from when you were married, they
mhm,
have a stake in your divorce because they
mhm.
knew your spouse, they have an opinion, they have a relationship, they
Right,
know you, they know your kids. And so they're giving what they think
right,
maybe is good advice, but
right.
it may not be the right thing for you at that moment.
That's right.
And that's why you need an outside voice who's experienced in divorce, who can
Mhm,
have a clear view of what you're sharing about your
mhm.
scenario and you won't feel like you're always putting baggage on your friends. Like
Mhm.
sometimes my clients are like, my friends are so tired of me talking.
Right.
And I hear that and I say, look, maybe they are.
Mhm.
And that's why this space exists for you.
Exactly.
And
That's why
then,
the support groups are
yeah,
so important, because they know,
yeah,
like, Tuesday's coming. Okay, something happened on the weekend, but I don't have to call all of my friends this weekend because I
exactly.
know support group's coming on Tuesday and I can just hold it till then. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story, the work
Oh,
you do in groups, and your book, Unhitched. I'm so excited. It comes out January 13th on
mhm,
Amazon. The link is
mhm.
here on the screen and in the show notes.
And
And
it's available for pre-order now if people wanna pre-order it. It's a great way to support an author, so
yes, it is. And I already pre-ordered it. I'm like
oh,
anxious
thank
to get
you.
it. So
Thank you.
I'm really excited. Una, how can people get in touch with you?
The best way is through my website. It's www.oonametz.com. That's OONAMETZ.com. I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can find me there. And I really look forward to being in touch. I love hearing from people. So
That's wonderful. So thank you again. And you can find me at Lisa Lisser, or sorry, Lisa at lzlcoaching.com. And my website is lzlcoaching.com. So excited to have you, Una. Thanks again. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with our next Dishing on Divorce.
thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure.